I'm Gail Letts, and I am pleased to welcome you to this week's edition of Let's Talk. For those of you who are new to our program, Let's Talk is a weekly webinar designed specifically for women that discusses topics of finance, business, career, and health and wellness. And for those men who have joined us today, we are very pleased that you are with us. Our program today focuses on handling stress and anxiety, working from home, sharing space with spouses, partners, kids, and family pets, homeschooling, and pivoting as we all prepare for the new normal. Joining us today are two dynamic women. Ryann Lofchie, former CEO and owner of the Frontier Project, where she built a career with a company around an unwavering belief in human potential. With a dedication to creating environments where people can do their best and helping leaders rise to the challenges of leadership, Ryann guided organizations through cultural transformations and equipped them to navigate an increasingly complex world. Ryann studied philosophy and psychology at the University of Illinois, where she also earned her master's degree in human resources. She also received her MBA from the University of Richmond. Alex Ginsberg is a creative arts therapist and holds a master's in counseling drama therapy from NYU, where she studied at the Stellar Adler Conservatory for 4 years. Following a career as a professional actor in New York, Los Angeles, and Europe, Alex found her passion for utilizing the arts in healing and earned an MA, a master's in counseling psychology with a focus in drama therapy from the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, California. Over the next 35 to 45 minutes, Alex and Ryann will be sharing their personal stories, their thoughts, and their insights with you. If you do have a question, please feel free to either use the Q&A or chat features on your screen to ask a question. I promise you will be watching and we will ask you questions when we can fit them in. So let's begin. Ryann and Alex, I would love for you to share with our audience your career journeys. So Alex, let's start with you.
Oh boy, I giggle because it's non-linear, to say the least. It is definitely led by my spirit and my passion for healing and community. My first career was as an actor. And because through my training and through my experience, I really found that that's where art and healing was most dynamic. I soon realized that as a career and as a profession, that the realities of the profession were very much not in line with the way I wanted to lead my life and live my life as a human, especially as a woman. And so I, in very circuitous ways, found myself studying drama therapy in California. I had left New York. I lived on an oyster farm outside of San Francisco, and I did a lot of reading and playing of music and healing and volunteering at a crisis center with youth, and recognized that really for me, utilizing the arts for wellness and for healing and for growth was what resonated for me. It was why art was important and why making it was important. So I went ahead and did that. I concurrently had my daughter while I was finishing up graduate school and working in a psychiatric hospital in my internship as a drama therapist with all populations, which was incredible. And my daughter was 18 months at the time. And I graduated and realized, I wanted this dream job as a drama therapist in a hospital, and that happened. And I got that job, and I decided not to take the job in order to start a preschool called Miss Livy's Play Garden with my daughter and 5 other children. Because I really wanted to be with her, and so we did that for a while, and then we had the blessing of moving to Richmond, and I've worked in multiple nonprofits in therapeutic capacities, residential treatment centers, foster care, therapeutic day schools, community-based services, and I also had the privilege of working with the live art program with Spark, working with children with and without disabilities together in inclusive programming, and really have recognized that you mentioned the word pivot, and I think that my life has been a series of pivots based on, I think as a woman, really feeling like there are multiple things that I want in my life. Like I didn't just want to work and I didn't just want to be a mom. I wanted to do all those things. And so I've definitely been adjusting and accommodating based on that. And it's definitely been spirit led. I mean, there've been a lot of times where, it's been hard to say no, and it's been hard to listen to my heart and my gut and make choices that felt right for me. Mm-hmm. As a human. So yeah, that's my journey.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Ryann, how about you?
Sure. Well, my journey starts out graduating from undergrad right at the time of the dot-com bust. So I stayed in school to pursue a degree in human resources, and then was really lucky, actually. I was one of the very few people in my master's program to actually get a job out of school. I moved from Chicago to St. Louis to join a corporate leadership program. It was awesome. It was like a wonderful, wonderful job opportunity. I learned a ton. It was a rotational thing. So I started in St. Louis, they moved me to Pittsburgh a couple of years later, and I was doing various HR jobs. And of course I had, taken the time to study HR and really, took a step back and was like, I do not love this, and I was young, but I was like, this is not it. So I went back to school to get an MBA. Because I really like school. And I don't know if it's like a combination of being kind of a nerd. Maybe it's being a nerd and not really knowing what I want to do with my life necessarily. But so I went back to school, was working part-time, just trying to like figure out where I might fit in. And just had a lot of interesting experiences working in different places where, almost as you had said, Alex, like some of them very male dominated, some of them just culturally not where I felt like I was going to thrive. Graduated from my MBA, went to a nonprofit because I was like, this has to be it. Like, I'm going to save the world in this way. Like I just was like searching, didn't love that. And then the opportunity with the Frontier Project literally fell in my lap. Like I got a phone call one day that said, hey, we've got a project we think you'd be a good fit for. And I showed up for a coffee, and the next thing I knew, I had a full-time job offer. And so that was awesome. It was a startup company. Part of the sales pitch to me was that I'd be able to like really have a hand in building the culture of this company. And, and it's interesting, Alex, you say that, what you're doing is really spirit-led, and just that, you really wanted to figure out where you can make the best, the biggest impact. And like, my story is so different because I really just wanted to build a place I felt like I could fit, like I just didn't feel like I had fit before. So it's kind of like really, I don't want to say selfish, but on one hand, what was awesome about it was being able to be with Frontier through the journey of growing that company into, I was the third employee. There's a point in time where we got up to 50 employees. We were winning awards for culture, for being a fast growing company. That was awesome. It was like everything the sort of entrepreneurial dream is sort of, going to be, or, what people like want it to be. And I feel successful in building that culture where people were really valued, and we were able to really see people for who they are and really help them tap into how they can uniquely contribite. And I loved that aspect of it. I had 2 babies while doing this, and there really was a point where and it's a kind of a long story, but it was sort of like divine intervention on some level. But I woke up one morning and was like, this isn't how this is going to work anymore, and made a very active choice to pivot the company to, instead of grow, and we were growing really fast, we were doing the hamster wheel thing like crazy, to really scale it back, to focus on different things. We were focused on growth, we were focused on, all of those sort of markers of success, and all of a sudden those things didn't really appeal to me anymore. What I cared about was doing awesome work, which we always cared about, but like really making a true impact on the companies and the cultures that we were able to, work with, and really like loving every day, as opposed to feeling like there was some goal out there that we were working toward, and then as soon as we met the goal, we'd move on to the next goal, because that's how I was wired, like super ambitious, super like go. And I swear to God, it's like one day everything just changed. And so anyway, so basically kind of like pivoted, retracted, revised what we were doing and went back out into the world. And that was interesting and awesome. And I'm really happy we did it, because it did become a much more enjoyable experience. I think for us and for our clients, I think we did way better work, and we had a way better, just much more fulfilling work day when we were really focused on, really focused on sort of like bringing our hearts out into our work. Anyway, sorry, long story short then is that, so we kind of got that to that place where it was running and it was wonderful. And I spent about a year with this like niggling feeling in the bottom of my stomach that this wasn't what I was supposed to do for the rest of my life. I have no idea what it is I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life, but I started the process of selling the company once I realized that was what I really needed to do for me. So now that actually the transaction was completed in January. I rolled off the sort of day-to-day in March, and now am home. I mean, we're all home, but I'm home without an official position, really looking at what is coming next for me and my career.
So Ryann, that actually leads me great into the next question. You mentioned earlier about everything changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you transition out of the Frontier Project and are going to take a couple months off and figure out the next step, and the whole environment changes.
Yep.
Stress, anxiety, challenges. How are you doing? And what does it feel like? And what's going on with your thought? I think an awful lot of us are re-examining what we want to be when this new normal gets
right
there.
Yeah. And I'll say, on one hand, it's been a little bit of what I was expecting, because honestly, and I had joked around about this, like that as soon as I wasn't working, I was going to sit at home and read books all day, because that was like the thing I was craving. I wanted to plant a garden. I wanted to spend time with my kids, and I wanted to read books. And, no better time than shelter in place to, make that happen. Of course, it looks and feels a little bit different than I was expecting, but it's almost like in the very short run, I'm doing what I kind of wanted to do. Let's just take a breather and decompress. A global pandemic introduces a different type of anxiety than I was expecting to be processing while doing this kind of decompression. So of course that's made everything complicated. And it's really interesting. I mean, I think this has been, for me, part of this was the soul searching of trying to figure out what comes next. And interestingly, having something this heavy happening almost enhances that soul searching. Like it's an opportunity to take it really deep and not, you kind of can't, you can't skim the surface right now if you're trying to really figure out what the best way to plug into the world looks like. And of course that's changing all the time. So that really is the thing, as I consider what might come next. I had a couple of ideas, but, I'm really in a place, and Alex, I just love, I love how motivated you are to make an impact and really help people heal. But I think we're going to need a lot of healing coming out of this. And I don't know what that might look like for me in terms of what I do or how I do it, but it's definitely introduced an aspect of I've always wanted to help people. I just think this, the pandemic may end up sort of yielding a different outcome than had we not been dealing with this. But yeah, on some level, it's a little bit of what I expected, and I would have been sort of at home anyway, enjoying the the quiet and not having a schedule that, you know, I was sort of beholden to all day long. But yeah, I think, you know, in a way it's allowed me to, on a daily basis, I mean, truly every day I wake up and I'm like, my family is healthy and I am healthy and we are safe. And, you know, it's a great time to check in like that and really develop that gratitude muscles, because I think that's what we need to get through this.
I love that, gratitude muscles. Alex, Ryann had just mentioned healing experts, and that's so much of what you do, is help people heal. The environment that we're in today, very, very different. How are you personally adjusting to all of it, and what do you find to be the greatest challenges and opportunities?
That's a good question. So I work with Launchpad Counseling, and as a practice, we have moved our practice online and started very quickly jumping in and working through telehealth. I feel really, really lucky that the internet exists, that clients have the ongoing support. I just think that is, you know, really exceptional and extraordinary, and don't know what it would feel like if that weren't the case. I would be very worried about people, and so that's been a gift. It's different, you know, the therapeutic process. I really understand now from sort of almost a physiological sort of animal human perspective that there is something that happens in the room with other humans that is biochemical, that I don't know that the same thing happens over a screen. I mean, there are definitely moments, but there's just not that same sort of exchange. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, you know, it's interesting, like in terms of being like an expert in healing, I think the way I wrap my brain around that, because I don't feel like an expert really, right? But I feel very comfortable based on my training and years in, and work on myself in my own therapy and work in supervision and building awareness and my yoga practice and meditation practice and all the things that I have in place. I feel very uncomfortable in not being comfortable. And I'm also at a point in my life, I don't know if it's my age, but I'm feeling fairly brave and irreverent. I'm feeling in the best way possible. I mean, I'm feeling like it's really, I'm tired of censoring myself. I'm tired of questioning. I'm tired of being afraid to take up space the way I would like to dare to. I'm tired of apologizing. I'm tired of us women apologizing. I mean, our friend Eva DeVergelis wrote a beautiful piece that was at Virginia Rep that really highlighted this idea of women apologizing for existence, really, and we're extraordinary. I mean, our ability to, I'm really deeply inspired. I know men are doing it too, but I just happen to have multiple female friends who are very quickly adapting to this online world, and they're artists and educators and musicians. And it's super inspiring to see how bravely people are jumping in to trying something new and to getting messy and to growing and shifting and changing. I like that it's a raw experience right now. I dread the day that Zoom becomes a polished experience. I'm loving seeing celebrities just being brave and playing their music and getting the sound wrong. And, you know, there's a certain freedom in it. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't want to be Pollyanna about it, because I think there's a freedom, but people are suffering at the same time. And the world is confusing. And I think it's just being able to tolerate holding those multiple truths without judgment.
You know, Alex, you had mentioned the tendency for women to apologize. A book had been recommended to me, about a year ago, Girls Stop Apologizing. You've probably heard of it. And it was funny. So I got it. And the first half of it, I kept thinking, oh, this is not me. This is not me. This is not me. Well, I think I was in total denial. And by the time I got to the second half of the book, it was like, oh, wait a second, maybe I do that. And I made a conscious effort to stop apologizing so much. But what I also came to understand, I actually did a program for a group a couple months ago on language. Apologizing sometimes is genuine, as long as you don't overdo it. It is okay to say, I'm not perfect and I apologize for it, and then move on. So it's a very interesting balance between not apologizing, and women do it too much,
Right.
More than men, but not taking it out of your fiber.
Sure. And I think what Eva so beautifully pointed out in her piece is it's not apologizing, right? But it's apologizing when you really mean the apology, and when you're sorry for a behavior,
Yes.
and not apologizing for like breathing or bumping up against somebody or dropping something on the floor. You know, this I'm sorry is so part of our vocabulary, I think, as women. But yes, heartfelt apologies are so important.
Well, and what I do find is that apology can just so undermine so much, and just, very quick, tangent off is, so I'm a golfer. I'm not a good golfer at all, but I'm a golfer. And what I was finding after about 2/3 of the way through this book is I realized every time I hit a bad shot, I was saying to people in my foursome, I'm sorry. And I'm thinking, why am I apologizing to them for hitting a bad shot? And the more I apologized, the worse my golf game got. And I thought, Gail, stop this. You don't have to apologize for being less than perfect. That is part of life. So Alex, a question for you is, how are you talking to your kids about the effects of COVID, and how their social, emotional well-being is being challenged at the moment?
So I have a teenager. She is 16. So the conversation is honest. And a lot of it is, because their frontal lobes are not quite developed yet, and they think that they are, trying to help her remember the potential impacts of choices, that hanging out with friends could be very dangerous for other people.
Yeah.
That this is very hard, normalizing it, empathizing, while also having to set limits. I think it was much harder at the beginning because it was such an abrupt shift, and it was very hard for she and her friends to understand. I have a pre-existing condition, so I have to be super, super mindful. So then there was that piece of, there was a little bit of resentment of that, that her life had to shift a lot. With that said, she has really graciously and gracefully embraced this reality, is extremely mindful and cautious and thoughtful. So I'm very lucky in that way.
Thank you. Thank you. Ryan, you have a blended family of 6 kids in the household. And first of all, I admire you. So what are the ages, and how are you dealing with that same issue on having them deal with the social and the emotional aspects of this isolation? Although they're not really isolated with everybody else in the household,
right.
But it's got to be a new dynamic.
Well, and that actually has been kind of an awesome element of being a blended family, because so it's a little confusing the way we're set up. There's 6 kids in total. 2 of them are my biological children. 4 are my spouse's. He has older kids, and I'm not going to get their ages right because they were all sort of spaced out perfectly, where their birthdays happen like really close to one another, but they don't go in order. So anyway, I think we've got 16, 14, 13 and 11 now of his children. And then mine are almost 10 and 6. And so what happens is we've worked this out with our former spouses, where we're able to have all the kids together at the same time and then have them go back to the other house at the same time. So we have 2 modes. We have a total crazy zoo mode, and then we have totally quiet, Andy's working during the day and I get to like plant tomatoes, so it's like we shift gears. It's a really hard shift, but that's the way it's working right now. So what happens is when they come back together, it's like they do almost have, it's not like a play date, because of course at a certain point, 2 weeks in, they're over it, but they can mix up how they interact with each other in a way that I think it does keep the peace in the house a lot longer than if it was just my kids together. I mean, they last 3 hours and then they'd be over each other. So of course with that age range, when the oldest is 16 and the youngest one is 6, the messaging's completely different around what is happening. And Alex, to your point, on the older end of the spectrum, having a record, being able to be honest, but then also having that sort of almost personal responsibility aspect of the conversation around how important this is. And it's not, we're not worried about them necessarily getting sick, although that's almost too broad a brush at this point, because everyone's impacted by it. But that it's that they can make choices that can impact other people in a way that is not ultimately the impact they want to have, but they need to recognize that their behavior, really does have consequences, or can. And then, for my girls, we've taken this really seriously. And we just have people in the other houses that, have compromised immune systems and that sort of thing. So we're trying really hard to make sure we're not sending kids back that have been exposed. I want to be as responsible as I can, of course, for us, but for everybody in this ecosystem, because it's this huge ecosystem that we have. And, so my kids had a hard time with just kind of wrapping their head around it, and it's striking that balance between not scaring them, but also not, but also being as honest as is appropriate from an age perspective. So we have had some really emotional conversations around why, like when their dad comes to drop something off, why they can't run out and see him. And, like I said, we've been pretty serious about it, where we have said, hey, we're going to minimize all interactions. And so if I'm not the parent in charge, I don't get to roll up and see the kids. Like that's not how it works, which is why we're doing 2-week increments, because we're trying to sort of keep it, at that point, symptoms may present, it's like we're trying to be scientific about a totally imperfect system. But anyway, and so that's been really hard, when their dad is out front dropping off a computer and they can't run out and say hi. Of course they can say hi through the window, but they want to give them a hug. And it's like, we're trying really hard to just be like, this is how it works. This is, and just be as honest and truthful as possible. And we have had some, teary conversations about, especially my 9-year-old, like being scared and having to just work through that. And it's awesome. Like, I love the fact that she'll be so honest with me about that and be able to just kind of like let it hang out and we can talk it through, because I actually think with her, she's very in her head, and she's also really mature. So, so she actually does better with more information. It doesn't make her more anxious. I think she feels more in control when she knows more. Mm-hmm. So we can talk. And my little one's just like, I don't know. She's the most like, she's crazy, but she's also like the most lighthearted, fun, fearless person in the world. So she's kind of rolls with it, and she's been fine. It's more been my older one's the one that's really, trying to like, make sense of the world and is really scared. I also, my mom's in a nursing home in Chicago. And so they are, they're very well aware of the fact that she's very vulnerable. And so that's on their mind a lot too. And they'll get emotional about that, just, which is of course totally fair. So we talk about it a lot, but I think the more we talk about it, the more we're really updating them with information that we're learning. and just not hiding anything. I think the more comfortable they feel with it, knowing that we're all in this place of like great uncertainty. So that's how we've been trying to manage it.
So Ryann, I've talked to so many people who have kids at home, and frequently I am hearing kind of this silver bullet that really something really clicks with the family, something really works. A scavenger hunt type thing, or just different activities. Have you found that one thing that kind of brings everybody together?
Oh, it's so funny. No. But I mean, the one thing that really there's two things that really bring everyone together. One is when we kick them outside and they hate us for that, and then they make something up to do and end up having a ball. But that's kind of like normal everyday parenting, you're like, get out of here. And then all of a sudden they're having like the greatest time because they've made up some kind of wonderful game, or, and then otherwise, we're trying to, it's so hard to get the balance right. We're trying to minimize screens as much as possible, because now that they're home, they could just live on it all day long. One of my daughters has completely virtual school, and they're running the school day like a regular school day. So she's actually staring at a screen all day long, interacting with her peers and her teachers. And the other one I'm homeschooling because they don't have the same, and she's in kindergarten. So anyway, so they even that, like, there's just different modes. And on some level, I need Kate to like get away from the computer sometimes too. Anyway, this is a long way to say the other thing that unifies everybody is when they're all allowed on screens together, because there is one video game that they really like to play together. And all of them, from the 16-year-old to the 6-year-old, will play this video game together in different parts of the house, but like yell at each other. I don't know. And it's great, and they love it. But I'm not proud of that necessarily. Like, I wish it was like, yeah, we all play Scrabble every night, but that's not. With the ages, it's really hard to find that like one thing that we can all kind of like engage in and do together.
Going from 6 to 16 as well, that's such a wide range.
Yeah.
So Alex, you've got the one daughter at home.
Uh-huh.
How has homeschooling gone for her? And have you found anything that really works that's a blessing right now with all of this?
Yes. I'm having time with her right now that I know I will potentially not have again.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very aware of that. Mm-hmm. Especially as a teenager. I mean, we would have time together sort of pre-COVID virus in the car when she was learning how to drive. But teenagers are super busy, and their job is to be finding families and homes in peer groups. I mean, that's developmentally healthy and appropriate. And although I'm sad for her because I know she misses her friends a lot, I feel really blessed to have this time together, and it's very simple time, and we're enjoying each other. Homeschooling, it's been interesting. She goes to the Appomattox Governor's School, and they pull from counties, pretty far. So I think they really struggled to get things online because people have different access. Some people have internet, some people don't. Some people have computers, some people don't. I think they pulled it together, and she's been doing classes and enjoying it. Honestly, I haven't really been a part of it. She's very self-motivated. And I think the school is really working hard at adapting to, and she's an acting major too. So that's tough. So they're doing, play readings online. So she's pretty self-motivated. I haven't really done a whole lot there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex and Ryan, both of you have taken career journeys with twists and turns. What have you learned from these experiences, and what would you suggest to the people that are on the phone, when we come out of the restrictions and clearly the economy is being impacted? I think people spending so much time at home are rethinking even where they are. It's been a good time for reflection. Change, those pivots can be very uncomfortable. And a lot of people, especially women, even though they know they should take a pivot or a twist or a turn, they choose not to because it's safer not to. What advice, because I've got two courageous women in front of me, what advice would you have for women who are kind of realizing they need to take a pivot, but maybe they just can't get there emotionally? And I'll ask you first, Alex.
What I would hope for women who are feeling the calling to make change or shift or pivot is to listen to their gut, to listen to their heart, mm-hmm. to not only listen, but actually do something with the information, because I spent a lot of years, I think, professionally listening, but staying in the circumstances that were causing challenge or pain or that I wasn't resonating with. I would say, like, we need each other. Like, we need you to be brave and to take a deep breath and to follow your heart in whatever way that means, and to have your journey that's yours. It's not my journey. It's not anybody else's journey. And if that means that right now is not the time to be taking a big grand leap, that's cool too. But I think really listening to your heart and your gut and accepting where you are, treating yourself kindly and lovingly and compassionately, recognizing that change is tough. Taking little teeny tiny bites is really helpful of things. I think it's Brene Brown who talks about, the brain really doesn't like big shifts. So we got to trick ourselves with little things each day to make change, because then it feels good. And then we want to continue on that path. So just being kind with and loving who you are, where you are, and embracing your desire to move into another place, and doing it in your own way, at your own pace, but hearing yourself and honoring yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Ryann, what advice do you have? Words of encouragement to those women who are kind of sitting on the side of the pivot line.
Yeah, I think, I love your answer, Alex. I can add a couple of things to it, but I think what you said is, sort of it. It's, I can say, prior to my most recent pivot, the pivots that I had done in the past, it was so obvious to me that I needed a pivot, I couldn't, and I can be in my head a lot. So I do a really good job of walking myself through what's happening. I can intellectually unpack things. I'm not like a feeler. I can just kind of systematically work through it. And, in those cases in the past, when I had pivoted, it was it sort of didn't matter what the consequence was. I just knew what I was doing wasn't the right thing, and I needed to act on that. It just was such a strong drive to get out of whatever it was I was doing, because I just knew it wasn't good for me. And I have, I've done a lot of work on because we at Frontier, we are, wonderful fans of Brené's, and we do, we've looked at values and we share that with each other, and we talk about it a lot. And I definitely have a financial stability is a huge value of mine. And I don't even know that's a value. It's a huge prerequisite to anything I would ever do. I need to know that I have financial security. And so one, I've never made any sort of pivot unless I felt like financially I would be okay. And like by be okay, I mean, I might be eating ramen and not, shopping and that's fine. Cause I'm really willing to live on a very meager budget if I have to, in order to make my life work. But I need to know that I've got whatever whatever that feeling of whatever the number is in the bank account, I need to know that it's there before I'm going to make a change. And I think, so once that's sort of there for me, it's interesting. I'll say, so Andy and I have we had been actually up until recently, like really, really, disciplined around our meditation practice. And it's funny that in this time of feeling now, like I've got all this time on my hands and us like, probably needing to meditate more than ever, we have kind of not been doing it as much. But there's a point where as sort of a fun thing, and you guys are not going to think this is fun, but I was like, I proposed to him one day. I was like, hey, would you be willing to wake up at 4 a.m. for a month and meditate with me for an hour? And this was back like in September of 2019, maybe August 2019. And he was like, yeah, because, we're both kind of crazy. And we were like, let's try it. It'll be like a fun experiment. And I sat there for, 1 month every morning for an hour. And as soon as everything in my head sort of quieted out and like calmed down, I sat there and was like, I know I need to leave this role. Mm-hmm. Like it was an undeniable, it was like the second things got quiet, I couldn't stop that from being the overwhelming like message that I was hearing. And I don't know that I would have made the move that I just made had we not done that. Like I needed to hear it over and over and over and over. Like it was undeniable that that's what it was. And it wasn't, and the crazy thing is, because intellectually and even emotionally, like I was really happy. I loved my job. I worked with the greatest people in the entire world. We had amazing clients. We did work that I loved. I mean, there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. I just knew that I was at a point where something else would be a better fit, and I needed to let that unfold. So I realized that that's not, and that has never been my situation before ever, right? So it's not like that's how I make decisions. It just, but I will say the getting quiet process was really helpful. It was like the second I really owned that and had the courage to say it out loud, and it sort of started, like as soon as I owned it and it started, it was like, oh, this is so exactly what needs to happen, And I think some of that, Alex, to your point, like having support, find, if you are really feeling like something, like what you're doing isn't the right thing, find that person that you can confide in and just start that conversation, knowing that this is a person that's not going to judge you or have any sort of ulterior motive or, all of that, because, it needs to be like a really true friend that can just hear you out. But I think sometimes the more you own it for yourself, the more you're able to get that momentum behind what you need. And just be able to like unpack it to the point where, if you feel, so Alex, to your point, if now is not the right time, it is not the right time. Like there is an insane amount of uncertainty out in the world. If you've got a safe job and you're happy, like maybe you don't make a change, that might be, Susie Orman would sit here and tell you, don't leave a job. But I think, but if you really are in that heart space of like, this isn't right, figure out for you what those sort of prerequisites are. Like, what are the conditions that you have to have met in order to be able to move forward? If it's financial, if it's, working on what you're afraid of, like what the worst case scenario might be. I love worst case scenarioing, which sounds like, it sounds negative, but I think once I've worked out the worst case scenario, it's never, ever as bad as I think it's going to be ever. And then I'm like, okay, cool. But, so I'm not at all afraid to go down that path for myself in order to know that I'm cool with the consequences and then start going. But anyway, I think getting to the root of like what's under the what is the reason that you don't feel like you have courage right now? Because it's probably a fear, and it's probably rooted somewhere in something that you just don't feel, in the worst case scenario environment, that need won't be met. But knowing what that is and then being able to work through the worst case scenario is, you know, you're informed at least. But I think a lot of us just shut it down before we unpack it. And I think we need to unpack it.
And I will say, kind of following up on that is, you know, what I always found is that when I'm faced with those kinds of decisions, first of all, that's when I usually get those sleepless nights. And I find that I can start sleeping when I at least have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be executed tomorrow. It could be over the next 1, 2, or 3 years. But once I develop a plan, then I am just fine. So thank you for that. And as we move through, and I've been watching the time very carefully, I have one more question. This is actually, and I have been weaving questions in. We have been getting several questions, and I've been weaving them into the conversation. So this is a question for Alex. Alex, do you have any tips for our viewers for how to physically or mentally reduce the anxiety of day-to-day work and homeschool stressors? And if I'll elaborate just a little bit on that, this is actually a conversation I've had with quite a few of my friends. Even for the most positive of us, this environment is so different that on occasion, I can't imagine that there are many people who aren't hitting that wall. And so your advice, when you hit that wall, even the most positive of us, whether it's the wall because of the kids with homeschooling, or the wall just because emotionally you want this to be over and don't know what the future is going to be, what's your tip?
I can relate to that. I noticed my shoulders just went up to my ears. I took a deep breath because I feel that. Acceptance. I think step one for me is accepting all that that comes up. I really appreciate meditation practice, and I almost don't even want to call it that word because it can be super daunting. I really recommend downloading a meditation app. There's Calm, there's Breathe, there's Headspace, there's Insight Timer, there are a bazillion. And, you know, offering yourself the opportunity to just like put in some earbuds and even doing a 3-minute meditation changes your physiology, slows down the toxic stress chemistry in your body. I mean, it reduces the adrenaline and the norepinephrine and the cortisol, all of those toxic stress chemicals that we need to just sort of settle down in order to emotionally regulate. And so a 3-minute meditation, longer if you would like, that's great. Breath work is super helpful. Even, you know, the practice of breathing in, you know, for 5, holding for 3, exhaling for 7. Right? You do that 3 times and it really helps to settle the parasympathetic nervous system.
Let me get that again. So you breathe in for 5, you hold for 3, you exhale for 7.
Yeah, and I don't know that those numbers are actually correct or accurate in terms of the science, but I've chosen those numbers because they feel good to me. But it's, you know, it's regulating the breath, it's getting oxygen into your body, it's helping to soothe the nervous system. I am a huge fan of yin yoga. You can find classes online. I do have a dear friend in Richmond who teaches those classes. Her name is Nitya, and she's wonderful. And she teaches classes online. You can also find them on YouTube. And yin yoga is a practice of passive release. And it really is super helpful and key in trauma-informed care to help regulate the nervous system. And you don't even have to call it yoga. If you like to stretch. If you like to dance, I've been doing these great online classes with the Richmond Ballet, Rhythm and Motion, on Saturday mornings. And my best friend and I get on together via Zoom and we dance together for an hour.
Fabulous.
And that feels great. So, you know, I think it's finding the practices that feel good and make you feel better. Like talking to friends, having good conversations, if that feels good to you. If it doesn't, that's fine. Reading books, if that feels good to you. I mean, everybody has the activities that help them feel good, feel better. Taking walks, being outside, the sun's super important. But I think what's really key is is acceptance. I mean, we are in these crazy times, and we are going to have myriad feelings all day long, potentially. You know, we'll feel really good, and then we're not going to feel so great. And being really compassionate with ourselves. And in so doing, you know, I hate this idea that, like, you know, we should practice self-care because it's good for our families. I mean, that's important. I care about my family and I want to be a good person in it. I really do. But I'd love to sort of throw out the offering of, like, practice self-care because you're taking care of yourself, and your body needs it, and your mind needs it, and your heart needs it. And do what feels good.
Well, I think there's a lot of good advice right there. You know, it's interesting as you were talking. First of all, I did write down 5, 3, and 7, and I'll figure out whether those are the right numbers for me. Also, talking about the breathing made me kind of chuckle to myself because I graduated to an Apple Watch at Christmas, and I don't know if it reads your body rhythm, but mine every once in a while is telling me to breathe. And so it must be sensing the stressors in my system. The other thing, I'm sure I've got my very good friend Karen on the phone. I won't say the last name, but Karen had sent me an app on meditation, and she has been saying, Gail, try it. And to me, you know, being a wired type A personality, it's like, oh, no. And she knows me so well. And she said, you really need to try this. You will find that it will give you the calmness that you need. So,
one more thing. Laughter.
Yeah.
It is so helpful and healing. And, you know, the sillier the laughter, the better.
I love it. I love it. So to Alex and to Ryan, thank you so much. Your comments have been authentic and sincere, insightful and inspirational. And for that, I do say thank you. For those who are on the phone next week, we will focus on the world of venture capital. And joining us will be Chandra Brigman, who is the CEO and president of Activation Capital, Monique Adams, who is the executive director of 757 Angels, and Jen Basarelli, who is a revenue strategist, workplace culture expert, and co-founder of Women in Venture. So in closing, again, a very special thank you to Alex and to Ryan. Thank you to everybody who has joined us. I hope you all take some of these ideas, whether you're somebody who's sitting on the line and needs to think about pivoting, or somebody who needs to practice meditation or take a deep breath or find another reason to have a good belly laugh. Please do that. So to everybody, I say thanks again for joining us. Stay healthy and stay safe. And I hope you'll join us next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Well.